you never get a chance to get is to speak from the chief directly. The chief is here at every meeting, and you get to ask him questions coming straight from the horse's mouth because he's the one who makes all the decisions. He is the top cop of Bakersfield, and we are lucky to have a person that really want to do new police reform. He's trying to get the idea over to all his officers. He started with us to let us know that he is serious about this. And the Bakersfield community policing has been in business for 6 years. We're doing police reforming before the George Floyd incident ever happened. We have done some great things that have affected the academy, and the chief will want to talk about that later. He can. We are here to help you survive a situation so you can complain later. And that's some of the things we are talking about today, how to film at a safe distance without, you have a right to film. You have a right. They can't take it from you, they can't stop you, but you got to do it at a safe distance, and the chief and his committee will explain to you what that means. We're asking everybody to be very respectful. I don't care what you say, but be respectful, because you will get cut off. We want you to ask whatever you want to ask questions, and if you have questions, we ask you to stay on the topic. And anything that's not on the topic, you send in, and you can send notes to them, and they'll keep it, and we'll bring it up at our next future meeting. We got a bunch of future meetings. One of them is meet the patrol officers that run your community, that patrol your community. That's coming up. We're going to cover every piece of Bakersfield to make sure we meet with all the people so you know the officers in your neighborhood that patrol. Also, to show part of police reform, and we also have an advocate position. That comes through when, like I said, where you can survive a situation and be able to complain. It could be community advocate. Lady Escalante would be the person for that. You can meet with her. She'll help you write the whole thing up. If you have a complaint, she'll go down there with you to make sure it's right. And we are doing this to help the community. This is what's called transparency. We are a group that's trying to make reform, and so is the chief. But we do not just go along with anything. We fight for it. He fight for his, and we make sure it get done right. And that's very important for you to know that. We got a workshop on professional conduct of an officer. And when an officer do what he do right, usually the results is right. But if he do what is right, it's on our part as community to comply and get through the situation and go on to the next level. So that's pretty much all that I have to say. Hope y'all to continue to join us and put in questions and be a part of all our meetings. We got a lot of workshops coming up. Hopefully in July, be the first one to meet with the patrol officer in your neighborhood, And hopefully July we can be able to have a one-on-one community event so we can all get together and you can actually talk to the chief yourself and hear straight come from the horse's mouth, and we'll hope to make a change. The whole idea of the basic community group is to build a better relationship between the community and the police department, because that gives us a safer community, better outcomes, less accidents, and a safer place for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Appreciate it. And just to let everybody know, if you joined late, any questions that you have, please type them in the chat box. And if they're related to this topic as to recording police officers or filming, any of those questions, we will address those tonight. But like Walter said, we will have future meetings in the future and to discuss some of the topics that are maybe not related to this tonight. Just want to put that out there. And with that, Chief Terry, if you'd like to say a few words, sir.
Sure. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for participating in this forum and allowing us to connect. One of the things that we've certainly done a lot differently over the last year is trying to find new ways to connect with the community, and we found this technology in the whole world has, I suppose, but we're still interested in hearing from our community and sharing information with our community. And just to reaffirm some of what Walter talked about, and I want to thank Walter and all of the Bakersfield community policing groups, as they've been great partners over the last several years. He's right. They don't double stamp or just stamp everything or rubber stamp it. We've had some very difficult conversations at times, but we've had very productive ones and ones that This is a relationship that's been built on trust and the willingness to be vulnerable with each other, the willingness to have honest conversations. And so I was telling Walter before we started this evening that I've really appreciated him over the last several years, because what you heard tonight is what he said in nearly every one of our meetings, that this is about strengthening our relationship with the community. It's about improving trust, and it's about making a community safer for everyone as well. And so I could not have said it better, and I really do appreciate the willingness to work together to make reforms here in our community and to hold each other accountable as we work to make for a stronger and a safer Bakersfield for everybody. So again, I just thank Walter and all of the group for all the work that they've done for so many years. And I thank all of you for participating in this as well. Tonight we are talking about recording of police and the different ways that can be done. But before I get into that, and what I will do is I'll talk about what the law says. I will talk about what our policies and practices are and some of the training that we provided to our officers and what our expectations are of the officers and how they would interact with you if you are engaging in recording or filming of the police. But first, before I get into all of that, I want you to hear a little bit from the command staff that's here. Part of the reason they're here tonight is because I want you to know who they are. And I want you to know that the message that you're hearing from me is the same thing that you would hear from them, and the same thing that our personnel will hear from all of us. And so I think it's very important for our community to know the command staff at the police department, who these dedicated men are, what their focus is. They can talk a little bit about their areas of responsibility just briefly. But again, they're here because this is a singular message. And we'll talk about this in great detail. But what you're going to hear tonight is the same thing you'll hear from me, the same thing you'll hear from them, and what our officers are hearing from them as well, and what our expectations are. So with that, I'll turn it over to Assistant Chief Mike Hale, and the rest of the group can briefly introduce themselves, and we'll get going.
Thank you, Chief Terry. I'm happy to be here tonight. Looking forward to all the questions. Just to kind of repeat some of what's been said, but I believe in relationships. I believe in communication with the community, educating each other on perspective so that we can work better together and have a safer community. So I'm looking forward to the questions tonight. Just a little bit about myself. I'm born and raised here in Bakersfield, and I've worked at the police department for about 26 years. I get to work with Captain Blakemore, Captain Matson, and of course Chief Terry in a variety of areas within the police department that include training, our police academy, investigations division, and our communications center, amongst a few of the areas. So looking forward to tonight, and thank you.
Next, don't all jump in at once, but go ahead.
I'll go ahead and go. I'm Jeremy Grimes. I'm the captain over the investigations division. Been with about 25 years in law enforcement here with BPD for the last 23. I've been a captain for about 4 years now, and currently I'm over the investigations division, so all the detectives and the investigators that the police department utilizes.
All right, good afternoon, or good evening, I should say. Jason Matson, one of the captains here. I work kind of a dual role. I work directly for Chief Terry on quality assurance, so we look at the aggregate behavior of our overall performance of the organization, as well as policy development. And so we do a lot of kind of research for the chief and keep him apprised of many different areas and capacities of the organization in its overall performance. I also work for Assistant Chief Hale, oversee records, so all the records management for the department, and also the communication center, so all of the incoming calls and things that come into our communication center, responsible for the management over that unit. So I am, as many are, a lifelong resident of Bakersfield, and I come with a lot of different perspectives, as we all do, and I think I appreciate working with each and every one of these team members here, as well as the team with Walter and Nadine on many of the conversations that they have brought forward. And they are right in the sense that they bring forward the tough conversations and the tough discussions, but it, I think, makes us a more robust and more, I would say, I'd say a robust group that really are out there trying to advocate the need for, change where change can be sought. And so I look forward to the conversations. And thank you for having me.
Good evening. My name is Jeremy Blakemore. Echo the same sentiments that have been shared by the other captains, as well as Assistant Chief Hale and Chief Terry. I'm currently assigned over our Training and Logistics Division, which essentially means the primary responsibilities are our police academy, our recruitment efforts, and obviously with both of those components, both of which being very important in terms of the first entry-level reviews and the background process of who the applicants are that are trying to join our police force here for our community, as well as what type of training they receive. And then also our division is also responsible for the advanced, what we would refer to as the advanced officer training, so the ongoing perishable skills training and those types of things for our officers well after the academy.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And I just realized we haven't heard from our community member on the panel, Nadine Escalante. So everybody else has introduced themselves and talked a little bit about what their role is and why they're here. You want to say a few words?
Hi, everybody. My name is Nadine Escalante. I've been born and raised here in Kern County. My border collie is right next to us, joining us in the Zoom. She always likes to join us. I've been a community advocate about policing issues for over 10 years now. I've worked in law enforcement. I used to work for probation at juvenile hall for 10 years. And then I had my own issues with our law enforcement. So I've been on both sides of the fence per se. And so I find it that it's just what God has put me on this earth to do is to help people who have issues with our law enforcement, to help us learn how to talk to everybody and to vent what our concerns are so we can find solutions to the answers. Not just always yelling and hollering doesn't always make the results that we want. And I've learned from my own experience. So I'm thankful to be here, a part of Bakersfield Community Policing. And yes, we do have some conversations that are very hard, but very honest and truthful because we try to bring the perspective of the community. We're here to serve the community as well as serving our police department, trying to make Bakersfield a better community for all of us and for our children, most importantly.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Ryan, if there's nothing else, I'll just kind of go right into it and we'll get the conversation going. Okay. So tonight is really about recording of the police and what does that mean? What does that look like? In what circumstances should you do it? Can you do it? All about, that's really what tonight is about. So I will start the conversation with some direct information about what the law says, about the way the police department functions and our view of that, what the procedures are, what our direction is to our officers, and then certainly how we expect them to interact with you at that time. Let me just be very clear right out of the gate. A member of the public has an absolute right to record officers in public places or places that they have a right to be. That right is attached to the First Amendment in the Constitution. It is absolute. And we will do everything that we can to uphold that right. So let me be very clear. You can absolutely record the officers in public places, and in fact, you have the right to do it. You don't have the right to do it under any circumstances and any way that you would like to do it. The law is also very clear about that. Back in 2015, Governor Brown signed into law SB 411, which amended two penal code sections, Penal Code 69 and Penal Code 148, to include some specific language and broaden the law that allowed for and made it very clear that members of the public cannot be arrested for simply recording a police officer in a public place where they have a right to be, and filming or recording, taking photographs of an officer engaged in some sort of an investigation, engaged in an arrest, in a traffic stop, The law is very clear about that. And we worked very hard to make sure that our personnel understand what that law says specifically about that. There's two parts of this that I think will probably focus on some of the conversations, because it's where the decision is made of what's proper, what's appropriate, what's not. The law is very clear. You have an absolute right to record in a public place where you have a right to be. But what you don't have an absolute right is to impede or interfere in a police investigation. And that's where a lot of the conversation can take place, because what does that mean? Well, interference can mean a lot of different things depending on the type of situation that's occurring, the type of situation that you're monitoring or that you're watching or that that is happening in front of you. Interference can be direct interference, where you walk up on an officer in a traffic stop, or an officer is engaged in a conversation with a victim or attempting to arrest someone, and you come up and you directly get involved in them, in their personal space, getting between them and someone else. But that direct interference, that would not be allowed by the law. You can certainly step back from there and record everything that you're seeing, but you don't have the right to directly physically interfere. The law also prohibits interference in other ways, such as doing something that distracts or delays or substantially interferes with the investigation that takes place. That could be by yelling, making threats. That could be yelling, being intentional about trying to distract an officer from what they're doing so that they can't fulfill the investigation or they can't fulfill their duties. Those kinds of things would not be protected activity, and that would be a violation of the law. Well, there's a lot of room for that conversation, because what does that really look like? It's more than just yelling at an officer or shouting at them or calling them names or something. We'd certainly ask that you not do that, but those are protected activities, and you have a right to do that. The law, so that's why I said some of the conversation tonight will be about, okay, what is interference and how far is too far, how close is too close, and that really depends on the situations, but I'm sure that we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. So the law is very clear. You have an absolute right to do it whenever you're in a public place. What you don't have a right to do is to interfere or obstruct or somehow become a distraction to the officers such that it interferes with their duties and they can't accomplish what they're doing. That's where I think a lot of the conversation might go on tonight. But what our direction is to our officers is very much what I've told you. We've trained them on what the law says. When the law was modified, we sent out new information about the law into the department and training the officers to do that, describing for them in great detail how the law was changed, what the law now says. We've gone beyond that to train them just in the last couple of years to give them a little bit more direction on how to make those kinds of decisions when close is too close, or how to judge that distance that a community member might be so that the community member can fulfill and do what they have a right to do without interfering with the officers. And so some of the training has been for our officers to, we've trained them to, if somebody's getting too close and you're in the middle of an investigation, you're in the middle of dealing with something that's very important, or in a traffic stop or making an arrest or whatever that might be, if somebody gets too close, we've trained the officers to engage that person and ask them to step back. We know that you have an absolute right to do that. I'm not going to interfere with that, but I would ask that you step back a little bit so that we're not so close. That's an ask. Well, how close is too close? And again, I can't answer that with any real specificity here tonight, because we have to, it just depends on what the case is that the officer is dealing with. The last part of this is I want to say is the law does not allow the officers to make you stop recording if they don't like what you're seeing, or to go and take your phone to prevent you from recording. That is absolutely against our department policy, and the law does not allow that as well. So I hope that that's kind of set the foundation for the conversations tonight about what the law is, what our expectations and our training has been to our officers, and then what they might or might not do with regard to the recording or stopping you from recording. They absolutely should not do that unless they're going to make an arrest. and that would really be the only conditions or circumstances where they would interfere in that way. So I think I've laid the foundation, at least I hope I have, and then we can move on to the conversations.
Thank you, Chief, for providing some of that context to us. Nadine, I know we had spoken earlier, and you had mentioned a couple of encounters you had with the Bakersfield police officers from several years ago. This may be a good time to kind of lead into that, of what you experienced as a community member, what expectations is of a community member, community leader. What is your expectation of officers, and maybe talk about briefly the incidents that we spoke about earlier.
Okay. I want to remind people in the community, I used to be a peace officer. So I do understand, as a peace officer, when we are in the middle of an investigation, it's very important to not get in the officer's face, to be patient, to just please just try to be as calm as you possibly can, and then get our attention as soon as the situation's escalated. So there was 2 incidents that I actually watched with BPD. One was over here on the east side off of Oswell, where I saw an officer grab about a 13-year-old male, and he grabbed him real roughly by his arm. And I saw it, a bunch of other people saw it, so I flipped around, pulled over, and I started recording the officer. And the officer saw it, and he was really upset, so he asked me, "Why are you recording?" And I said, "Well, I'm recording because the way that you grabbed that kid, like, it just wasn't right." And he said, "Well, you don't even know what I'm doing. You know, this kid is having some mental health issues. I'm taking him over to the mental health facility right up the street on Oswell." And I told him, I said, "I used to work at juvenile hall, so I understand working with juveniles is not the easiest thing in the world, but we were never allowed to grab a kid that way, like grabbing him by his arm real roughly." And so once the officer had this young man in the car, the officer was really cool, because he said, "Well, if you think I'm doing something wrong, you're welcome to follow me over to the mental health facility." So I did, and I watched him get the kid out and take him inside. And then the officer came back outside, which was really surprising, and he asked me, he said, "Is there anything else that you're concerned about?" And I told him I was just really concerned by the way that you were talking to the kid, by the way that you grabbed him. You know, I would expect you to be more professional. You are an adult. You are a police officer. You should have more patience. And he talked about, like, the kid having some mental health issues and, you know, feeling suicidal. And I said, "Well, you should be considering that if this child is feeling suicidal, do you think being rough with him is an answer?" And it made the officer think twice. And so that's what I'm asking for community members when we see these things and we're recording officers, to be calm. Even though these can be stressful situations, to try to be as calm as you possibly can. Talk to them when the opportunity arises, if it does. And this opportunity arose. And so it made him understand, like, I'm speaking from a mother's point of view, from an ex-peace officer who worked in juvenile hall with kids that were sometimes difficult, but then also from a concerned advocate, a concerned community member's point of view. Because there was lots of cars driving by who wanted to stop, but when I stopped, they continued to just go ahead and go, because they knew somebody's watching, somebody's recording. The second incident that took place was again over here off of Mount Vernon, and I had seen about 6 officers pulling over a young white female, and this poor girl was sitting on the curb crying, saying, "It's not my car, I didn't steal it, I don't know what's going on, I was just going to the store." And so I pulled over, got out, started recording. The officer saw me and he said, "You can't record, you have to leave." And I said, "No, I can record, it's okay, I'm fine, go on and do what you have to do." Well, one of the officers was getting really upset because I was recording, and what I tried to do is get him to just take care of what he was dealing with. Eventually, that officer came over to me after they had the situation all taken care of. One officer said, "Well, you can't be here." And I said, "Well, I can." He said, "Well, you're on private property." So me and the man that I was standing on his front yard, we introduced ourselves and became friends. So we're still friends to this day. So I stayed there and I talked. Well, after this situation got finished, it was about 7 minutes. They left this young girl alone. She wasn't arrested. She didn't go to jail. So I don't know what happened because I wasn't there to actually know because I didn't ask the officers. But they knew I was recording and I was watching. And I was concerned. I was concerned for her safety because she kept saying she didn't do anything wrong. I was concerned for her as a woman because she was scared and she was shaking. She was visibly upset. The officer didn't want to talk, and I really didn't want to talk to him. So I just went home, and then I called BPD. I let them know the date, the time, how many officers were there. And so that's what I would encourage our community members to do is when you record these situations, ask to speak to the officer who's in charge once somebody's detained in the car, who's being arrested, whatever. When things have calmed down, ask to talk to them. And then if you can, get their name, their badge number, and then call BPD, call Ryan Croker because he's the community adjutant. Let him know of the situation so BPD can investigate and be aware. This is our responsibility as community members. So that's what I would ask, our community members to do in these situations. One other situation that I saw last year in the fall was a situation where there was several community members recording our law enforcement with a situation with the youth. What concerned me during that video was mostly the safety of 3 young men. They were so upset that they were getting in these officers' faces with the cameras. Please remember, there's an ongoing investigation going. You do not want to put yourself in harm's way by getting in the face of an officer. Because if you are that face being confrontational, that close being confrontational, you could be arrested. And that's the last thing that we want to see happen. We don't want to see you being an active community member recording and looking out for somebody else's best interest, their safety, and also looking out for our police department as well. But please be patient, keep your comments to yourself, and just talk to who's in charge when everything's done. So I think that's about it, Ryan.
All right. Oh, thank you.
Let me piggyback on a couple of those things that I think were important is when you're seeing some law enforcement activity, we've already settled, you have an absolute right to do it. We would certainly ask that you not interfere. And that's where it gets a little ambiguous because interference, the distance depends solely on what is occurring. So it's difficult and it will be impossible for us as the police department to say you have to stay a certain amount of distance away. That can't be done because the law just doesn't allow for it. But if you see some activity that you think is inappropriate, absolutely record it. But I would also tell you, and all of the men here that will tell you, call us immediately and tell us. You can call the watch commander immediately, 326-3818. You can call them and tell them what you've seen that you felt was inappropriate. You can call the non-emergency number at the police department, 327-7111. You can and report what you're seeing if you think it's inappropriate. You can certainly go online and there's information about internal affairs and how to file a complaint and all of those kinds of things if you feel like you were subjected to some inappropriate treatment by the police department. So, and again, these are very often very tense, chaotic, emotional type events, but we would ask that if you're going to record, you absolutely have a right to do it. We would just ask that you maintain that distance so that you don't interfere with what's occurring. But if you see something that's inappropriate or improper that you think, please let us know because we want to know about it. Hey, Walter's waving his hand.
Walter, you have something?
Yes, I just forgot to add to the community about filming. You need to get the ACLU app. That app is used to, it's a witness. It's called My Secret Witness. It's a witness that goes straight to an ACLU app, and then they have it already in storage. The recording is there. So you can always have credibility in what you're saying and doing, and it helps put a dent in a lot of bad situations. And if you have the app and everybody know you're using that app, it's going to stop a lot of things. So you can download it on your phone, use it to your best ability. It's a secret witness, and it goes straight to them, and there's cases for ACLU as well, and so we can put a dent in the stuff if we participate and do what we're supposed to do. And I just want you to know that and also do the Southern. We ain't in the Northern. They're going to ask you Northern or Southern. Use Southern for that app. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
All right, Walter. And the last thing I'll say, Ryan, before I turn it over to some questions is, all of the Bakersfield Police Department officers now have body cameras, and we've deployed them across every single officer. And so every patrolman that's out there, our detectives that are out working the field, everybody has body cameras. And so I just want to say how thankful and grateful I am to the community and providing us this resource, because it is very expensive, but it's also very important. And I'm very appreciative of the communities giving us this resource and this tool that ultimately makes us all safer, because the officers having the body cameras are a very, very important tool, and I'm grateful to that. So I'm sorry about that, Ryan. Now we'll turn it over to some questions.
No, absolutely, sir. I think the first one we'll go to, and I'll have Captain Blakemore, if you can jump on this one. And it was, are officers tested on their knowledge after being trained in what the law is, as it was previously described?
Sure, I'll jump on that. In terms of testing for some of the stuff, kind of like the chief has alluded to, I would say that one of the challenges is that each event has a lot of circumstances that come into play, a lot of variables, whether it's an incident on a basic traffic stop or something a little more high risk, something along those lines. So in terms of I say that because in terms of simple testing, it's not that simple. I think the more appropriate way that we typically deal with things is through our review processes, as Chief Terry had suggested, even with our body camera reviews, our body cameras that we have, we do a review process, even a sampling across all of our personnel that are issued body cameras to review basic interactions. Again, it's randomized. So we can look at those things, and then we identify, if we identify circumstances that need to be addressed through retraining, specifically with the individual officers that are involved, and we deal with that through our training division. If it's something that we identify through repeated issues, maybe things that are more of a trend across the organization, then we look at other ways that we can do retraining as well, whether it be through larger settings, briefing trainings, those types of things. So hopefully that answers that question, Ryan.
Yeah, I think it does. There's another question here, if nobody wants to add on to that one, that says, when does a photo or video become evidence? And then kind of a second part to it is, can an officer request to see the video or the photo? And Captain Grimes, would you mind taking that question?
Absolutely. Essentially, a photo or video can become evidence from the moment it's taken. Depends on what exactly it's captured. If it's captured some type of criminal offense, then it essentially at that point can be of evidentiary value. A lot of times when we conduct criminal investigations, if a citizen has let us know that they've recorded something or they have something of value on video, the officers will generally request to take a look at it to see if it is in fact of evidentiary value to the case. The law does allow us to, if something does have evidentiary value, to write search warrants and obtain that. But a lot of times with the body-worn cameras, they can record some of the things there. They can provide links to people so they can submit the video on their own. But that's essentially what will happen a lot of times when the video is introduced to the officers. I think I was getting at the gist of what that was asking.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. There's a question on here. I'll just read. I think it's kind of been answered, but the question was, if and when pulled over, do people have the right to pull out their cell phones and record the entire interaction with an officer during the stop? And the answer to that is yes, but obviously there's factors and variables that we've talked about. The chief, I think you spoke to about distancing and the situation and that type of deal. But yes, people can film the entire traffic stop. And also, Nadine, I think that kind of goes on with your stories from the past as well. Here's a question from Charles, and whoever wants to take this one, please feel free. And it's, should the witnesses to the death of George Floyd have intervened the assault by Officer Derek Chauvin? with those who are witnessing and recording. I don't know if someone wants to take that question.
I'll take that. That's a very, very difficult question and circumstance. Certainly, I think in the context, in the videos that I've seen from the members of the public, they were in that area that we were talking about. That's enough distance that they're not directly interfering. They're close enough to see what's going on. They're obviously recording. It became very valuable information. But to tell, I think the point of the question is, should the community members have physically intervened with the officers? And that's very, very difficult question, because I wouldn't make that, I wouldn't suggest that you do that. You can certainly call the police. They did a lot of different things, but those would be individualized decisions, and I certainly wouldn't sanction doing that. But recording as they did, like I said, it became very valuable information, and they were close enough to see in great detail what was occurring, as horrific as that was, but they were not so close that they were interfering with what the officers were actually doing or supposed to be doing at the time. And so, unfortunately, I mean, I can't provide a direct answer to that yes, you should do this, yes, you shouldn't do that, because it is situational, but the recording was certainly appropriate.
Thank you, Chief. There was another question about where can we find the policy on body cams, their use and availability to the public? And I can answer that one. Our policy manual is online. You can go to the City of Bakersfield's website, the police department specifically, and our body camera policy is on there. And that gives you all the information on our policy and other policies for that matter as well, but specifically body cams is covered on there.
And I'll just do a quick follow-up to that. It's policy 425, because obviously there's a lot of different policies in there, but if you're wanting to go specifically to the body-worn camera policy, it's policy 425.
Thank you, Captain Matson. I'm just looking at some of the questions here to try to make sure that...
And I know, just to reaffirm what Walter said at the beginning, although tonight we're talking about recording specifically, and we're going to try to stick to that topic, if there are other questions about other police department activities or other types of issues or other types of topics, we meet monthly with the Bakersfield Community Policing Group, and we meet at the end of this month, and we will be taking all the questions tonight that aren't specifically related to this topic, and we will be discussing them and finding ways to communicate back to the community on these topics. If you've left your name, I'm not sure exactly how this works, but if there's a way for us to recontact you, we can also respond to you directly about your question as well. Like Walter said, also, we have additional workshops that are coming this year. Hopefully we're going to be able to do them in person, but we are going to have many other topics that we're going to be covering with the community and the Bakersfield Community Policing Group as well. So there'll be other opportunities for us to engage on many different types of topics through the next several months of this year.
Thank you for that, Chief. Yeah, and just to reiterate, I don't know, everybody had to register to get a link for this. There's an email also on the very bottom of that flyer. It's bpdcommunity@bakersfieldpd.us. If anybody has any questions or anything that they'd like to get more information about, please feel free to email that website, or excuse me, that email, and then we will get back to you, and myself or someone from Community Relations, to make sure that your questions are being answered.
Right.
Go ahead, Nadine.
And also, I just wanted to say to the community members that are watching us, if you don't feel comfortable with reaching out to BPD just yet, you can find me on Facebook as Faith Grace, and you can send me a friend request, or you can message me if you want to get in contact with me or with Walter or with other members on our team as well with questions that you have.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's something that we should put out there. Is if they want to contact members of the Bakersfield Community Policing Group, how do they do that?
A few of us have Facebook pages, so you can find us on Facebook. So Walter Williams, you can find him on Facebook. Myself, it's Faith Grace. It's not Nadine Escalante, it's Faith Grace. There's Janita Clemens is on our community policing, our Bakersfield Community Policing team. Mike Tan Kathy Stiles, Chuck Shawyer, and we have one other person on there, but she's not on social media. So, there's two others that they're not on social media, but we can connect you. If you reach out to one of us and you want to talk to somebody else, like if you reach out to me but you want to talk to Walter, I can connect you to Walter. So whoever you're trying to get in touch with, we can make sure you connect with that individual. And you're welcome to message us. Cell phones, you can call, you can text, whatever's convenient for you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Nadine. From what I can see, I think we just have one more question up to this point that kind of is along the lines of the focus of what we're trying to do tonight. Obviously, in the future, we'll have more, and based off of some of the feedback we get, we'll surround it with those topics. But it said, with some of the stringers, I feel they may overstep their First Amendment rights when filming. Can you ban them from filming from repetitive disrespect of law enforcement officers? And I don't know if they're stringers meaning those individuals who are out, First Amendment auditors and so forth. But can you ban them from being disrespectful to law enforcement officers? If anybody from the group would like to jump on that.
I can take that one, Ryan. So I think they were talking about streamers, perhaps, is what they meant. And so, no, we can't revoke somebody's First Amendment right. Some of what we do in our training and practice is, when we're out on a scene, there may be an instance where a supervisor or another officer will give a directive, and they should be very specific and say, I need you to stay this distance back. And they may specify a distance, they may give a place where they want you to stand, and that is where the public needs to stay during that incident. It's going to vary based on the scenario and the different scenes that are going on, but they will be very specific as to if they have a scene that they need to contain, where somebody can stand, and where they would be encroaching on that. Once somebody encroaches on that they've been told to stay out of that small immediate area, they may receive additional warnings, and if they persist, they may get legal action at that point. But to the original question, there is no way that we can, fortunately, revoke somebody's constitutional rights. And we're not about to do anything like that.
Thanks, Captain. And I also want to recognize Lieutenant Kevin Fiddler is on here as well. He's a lieutenant of our Internal Affairs Division and deals with complaints and so forth. I just wanted to point out that he was here. Walter, you're raising your hand again. You got something to say?
Yes, sir. I want to tell everybody this is an opportunity for you to voice your opinion. It's so easy to voice your opinions to your friends and do that type of thing, but when you have an opportunity to make change, to do something about it, and you're speaking to the chief himself, there's no other law enforcement is putting himself out there like Chief Terry is. Tell me what law enforcement, not the Sheriff Department, it's not no DOJ, it's nobody. We are something very much new. This man is putting himself out there willing to meet the community halfway. And we don't have questions. You know you got a lot of questions. It might not even be the thing you want to say nice, but as long as you say respectful, it goes. And that's what we here to ask the hard questions. That's what I want y'all to do is ask the hard question. How else can we make it better for us if we don't? We keep hiding. We don't want to tell the truth. You know, it's bias and prejudice all in the world. We figured that out this year. The Capitol and the president was all that. So it's no secret. But to change that, we need to talk about it and reach a better common ground. And then with Nadine, with the advocate position, you can reach her on Facebook Grace. If you got a complaint, call her. She'll help you write it up. It's about being transparent. It's about the chief want to be transferred to make sure that his guys is listening to him. Well, we can't do that if we ain't telling the truth. If you got a complaint, contact Nadine Escalante on Facebook. And if she want to give you more information, she will. But this is about making this is about police reforming. Let's start doing it. Quit talking about always being angry. Tell your friends, I hate this, I hate that, I hate cops here and I hate this. Well, do something about it in a positive way. Let's get out here, come to these meetings, talk to them when we got opportunity to talk. I guarantee you, Chief Terry is the only top cop in Kern County is putting himself out there to you to answer you and give you what you want is a direct answer. So let's start taking advantage of this. And these community meetings is not easy. Take a lot of work to put them on. The Bakersfield Community Police Group, we are all about the community, and we're also about building a relationship between the community and the police station, BPD. And it's all about, it's bigger than us. It's not about us. It's not about nobody in the group. It's about nobody. It's about teaching you how to survive in a complaint letter. And that's why we got Nadine Escalante. And Chief is doing a great job. He is trying to make some true, honestly true police reforming. So he asked to be held accountable. That's what we're doing, and we need y'all to do the same. Okay? Let's do not sit here and waste these people's time.
Ryan, can I say something?
Sure.
I want to add to what Walter is saying. After I've had my bad issues with our law enforcement, it took a lot to get to the point to actually being able to speak and have conversations with our law enforcement, whether it's BPD or with the Sheriff's Department. This is how we create change in the community, is actually having conversations, speaking up, saying something, participating in these community workshops, whether it's an anonymous account or if it's your name. Asking questions. Please use these opportunities. There's a community email. If you don't feel comfortable with sending a question in this evening, send in a question on the email. Reach out to us. We are trying to create transparency and conversation with our community. We're trying to hear what our community wants, their answers, their questions, their concerns being heard. And we can't get there if we don't have everybody joining us. And so it's imperative that for those who didn't join us tonight, please share this. Please let people know there's a Bakersfield Community Policing team who's more than happy to help them with their concerns. To reach out to Ryan Croker, who's a community adjutant. His job is to work with the community with their concerns. To please let your friends, your neighbors, your children, your children's friends know that we are striving to do our best to get engagement with our community. Because we know this cannot change, things cannot change in our community if us, the community members, aren't speaking up. And they are listening. Even though some hard issues are being talked about, they do listen. And I really greatly appreciate that. I mean, it's taken a long way for me to get to where I'm at today, but believe me, I would not be here if I did not know that my time being spent is being spent valuably. So I urge you all to please participate, give us a chance, because you're going to see Chief Terry's doing a great job. He's taken on an extraordinary role this last year with COVID, and we're doing some great things. So we really want to see the community get involved and get engaged, because we're here to serve you guys. So thank you.
Well, Walter and Nadine, you guys are very kind in the comments that you've made, but I would communicate to the community as well as this isn't just lip service, and we have had some very difficult conversations, and seem to have, them several times a month sometimes. But that's the reality, because we are committed to being the best police department that we can be. Having trusting community policing relationships, they don't happen overnight. And they're really formed through mutual respect and a shared understanding of each of our concerns. And that's really what our focus is. And when I say I, it's not me. It's not me in this police department. The men that you see on here tonight from the police department are as dedicated as I am to making the police department the best that it can be to serve our entire community, to have a safe community for everyone. The reality is we can't be successful as a police department if our community doesn't trust us. But we also recognize that we have to earn the trust. And this has to be repeated with behaviors over and over and over again, and demonstrate transparency and be responsive and hold ourselves accountable when things don't go well. Because the reality is they don't always. We're certainly not perfect, and I don't profess to be. But I can tell you that The men and women here are committed to this community. One of the things that's unique about Bakersfield is, and not like some other large cities, and we're a large city, the men and women who work here at the police department live here. They don't commute. They don't come in and work for a few days and then leave and go to another city and live. That just doesn't happen here. That's a unique experience here. And so we're very fortunate in that way. But again, we are committed to hearing from the community, to building and strengthening these relationships. And that's certainly what we're trying to do tonight. Obviously, tonight's topic is kind of narrow, and the law is pretty clear, so there's not a lot of conversations about what the law is or isn't. The law is clear. You have an absolute right to record. You just don't have a right to interfere. And what does that mean? And that's where the scenarios, and I think where some of the conversation can go. But we absolutely want to hear from you, and whether it's tonight or in future community policing meetings for sure. Ryan, do we have some more questions?
Yeah, there's a couple more, sir. Some of the stuff we've already kind of hit on, so probably just some clarification, but one of them is if citizens are name-calling officers, berating them while they think the officer is doing something inappropriate while they're recording an incident, can those citizens face criminal charges? Someone would like to take
No.
that.
Somebody else want to take it? But the answer is no. Calling names or shouting at them, that I don't think in its the way that was posed would necessarily be interference by the law. If it becomes so disruptive that the officer, for instance, can't carry on a conversation with the person they have detained or a victim or whoever they're working with, if it becomes such an interference and distraction that kind of thing can't be done in this sort of hypothetical, then maybe that would be. But by and large, those kinds of things, no. That is protected First Amendment activity.
All right, next question. My friend was recording a BPD officer while he was being questioned, and the officer took the phone and was talking back. Is that okay?
Okay, I'm not sure I've got all the pieces of that, but somebody else want to take it or?
Sure, I'll take that.
Okay.
Given the limited circumstances there, I can't say definitively what the answer is. As Chief Terry mentioned, if there's some type of interference going on, the officers can take some sort of action. The main thing to stress here is if you feel that you were treated inappropriately or that the actions were inappropriate by the officer, please let us know. That is not the behavior that we expect nor tolerate of our people. And if you feel you were treated inappropriately, contact us. Contact the Internal Affairs. If you feel that you can't do that or you're afraid to do that, we've got these community groups that are advocating to bring them to us as well. So let us know. Given the lack of details in that, that's about the best answer I can give. But we want to make sure that if you feel you have not been treated appropriately, that we know about it.
Thanks, Captain. And it looks like the last question here, which is, it is in line with what the topic is today, but it says, can videos of police activities be forcefully subpoenaed? So I imagine what he's saying is, can a recording, if a citizen's recording an officer, can that be subpoenaed and seized?
I'll just tag on that one because it was related to my earlier one. If there is some sort of criminal activity and a person possesses evidence that is evidence of that criminal activity, it is possible that a search warrant can be written for a device. It's the same thing as if it was a security DVR or something of that nature. A search warrant can be written and an item can be seized. With electronic devices, we have the ability to download them and then give the device back, but that's essentially if we believe that there is evidence of a crime.
Thanks, Captain. And like one more just came in. Is as for the streamers, when they are on scenes, should they be marked as media, or is there a way to let officers know that's who's on scene? So, because they may be dealing with streamers, should they be identifiable?
I'll take that question.
Okay, go ahead.
So there's several different ways. I mean, generally on any crime scene, the area is likely to be marked off And whenever it is marked off, oftentimes if it's going to be a critical incident or an incident that is going to be drawing media attention out, the department generally sets up an area for media, so that way we can give unified information to all the media outlets at any one time. So any streamer is allowed to be any place that they can outside of those confined areas. So if an area is marked off, even the media is not allowed to be inside of what would have been deemed the crime scene. So I would say is that anything outside that one could be a welcomed area to which a person is lawfully allowed to be, so long as it's on public area, not on somebody's private property, unless they get permission otherwise from that owner to be on that property. But if there's a media staging area, they can stand there just the same as the media can, even with or without any type of identifier, and be able to obtain that type of information that is being released, in some sort of public release statement or anything else. So I think that answers that question as I understand it.
Yeah, and I'll add a little bit onto that. Years ago, really before the explosion of all this technology and cell phones and things, the media outlets received credentials from public safety agencies so that they could enter some of these crime scenes or enter some of the areas so that the public could be informed. And one of the mechanisms to do that was to provide all the media with credentials. Well, that was way before, just like I said, all of the technology and cell phones, and now virtually anyone is a media member. Because they're recording and they're sharing and they're uploading it, and the community is being informed. So it's been a tremendous advantage for us in a lot of different ways. So all the streamers that are providing information to the media outlets, members of the public do that every day. A lot of the content from newscasts, local here and across the country, is from community members that are submitting these videos and these stories and this information to the different media outlets. And so our message really to our personnel is you're being recorded everywhere you go, and everything that you do and say in public is being recorded. One, for us now, it truly is, because you're wearing a body camera. But beyond that is just to engage and conduct yourself in the behaviors as though you're being recorded, as though what you're about to do or say will end up on the front page of the newspaper tomorrow morning. I mean, those are some of the kinds of conversations we've had with our personnel, because our expectation is that you're going to that you will enforce the law, that you will adhere to it, that you will adhere to our policies, and that you will engage in behaviors that are consistent with our guiding values. And Captain Grimes talked a little bit about this, and I've said it as well. If your experience with the police department is not what we're sort of describing for you here tonight, we want to know about it. Because maybe we need to train our officers better in certain areas. Maybe an officer doesn't make a right decision because a policy has been revised or a law has been changed and we haven't communicated that appropriately. Those are some of the things that we need to know. We want to know. Maybe there's a policy change that the officer is doing everything right because that's what our policy says. But maybe we need to change the policy. And so the feedback and the exchange and information from our community is very important. Captain Matson and his unit in particular, the Quality Assurance Unit, that's what they do. They're looking at the performance behaviors of the organization. They're developing systems where we audit and inspect the officer's behavior and work product to make sure that it's in line with the law, with policy, and the way that we expect our officers to police. And so this is just another mechanism of feedback from the community. It's very important feedback. But to get back to the question is why we don't do credentialing anymore is simply because there's so much of the cell phones and different types of cameras that are out there. Virtually every member of the public is a media member, and like I said, the law is very clear. You have an absolute right to do this in a public place.
One second here. The question just came in. When the person filming is part of the investigation or situation, does recording impede on the situation? Therefore, can that person film any longer? So, at what point in time in an investigation does someone become a witness and record to now they can't record anymore? Maybe is how I'm reading that question. If somebody wants to answer it.
I'll take I think I understand what's being asked. A person has all the rights in the world to be able to have their First Amendment rights to expression, but also as it relates to this idea of filming or anything else. Only time that a person would be prohibited from if they're part of the investigation, if they were being detained as part of that investigation, meaning that they have become some sort of active participant, either as suspect or a witness or anything else. But at the point where they're being detained and their freedom is being restricted as part of the investigation, as part of a detainment, a lawful detainment, at that point, that would be likely the case where they would no longer be allowed to record up until the point they're either arrested, if they're going to be arrested for a charge or whatever the case is. But if they're then released after their part of the investigation is done, they're going to be more than able to go back out and exercise their rights to be able to continue to video or record. So really, I would say the threshold is whether or not this person is being lawfully detained as part of an investigation, and their movements are thuswise being limited because of that detainment, because of the circumstances or their participation in the case. So I don't know if that seems to be, I think, where the question was going. I don't know if anybody else has another thought to it as well. But
Well, I was going to piggyback off of that because I think it's a good scenario. As you were talking and describing it, I was also thinking that, if you're live streaming, you're talking to an officer, you're on Facebook or YouTube or something like that, and what you're talking about is important facts of an investigation that if that information gets out there, then it could disrupt or interfere or damage the investigation. You might be asked to, if you're going to cooperate and participate in an investigation with us, we might ask you to not do that so that it doesn't jeopardize the outcome of an investigation. Because I can see some scenarios or think of some scenarios where that kind of thing could take place, where the officer might ask you to not record so that information doesn't get out there that could jeopardize the investigation. But that was the only thing I could add on to that. Nadine?
I was wondering if this individual was asking if you're getting pulled over for like a traffic stop, if that's what they're meaning being, if they have the right to record during that scenario. I'm not sure if that person's still there to clarify.
It seems, Nadine, that there was that it was an anonymous person, but they, for example, a traffic stop was what they're referring to.
yeah, so as it relates to a traffic stop, we just saw kind of a situation bore out here the other day publicly where this was a very common thing, and people have all the rights in the world to be able to record during a traffic stop. There again, unless they're going to be detained in the sense that their physical movements are going to be restrained because of some sort of lawful detention. And if, for example, if the officer is asking the person to exit because maybe they're wanted for something, or maybe they have been identified as a suspect in something, and their movements are otherwise going to be detained. So, and then just because of the traffic stop itself is not going to be, although you're detained because you're being for a lawful purpose, your actual physical movements within the car and stuff like that are not going to be restrained by the officer, because they're just going about their responsibilities to citation long enough to complete the citation. So you're more than welcome to be able to enforce some traffic stop in that type of circumstance. But there again, kind of taking it a step further in a hypothetical would be if, like I said, that person is maybe wanted. Maybe it was stopped as a part of a suspect vehicle possibly involved in a theft, and now that person is going to be otherwise detained as part of an investigation above and beyond what would be deemed a traffic stop. You could then see that potential where the restriction of a phone would no longer be allowed, because their movements are being detained as part of a lawful detention as part of an informal investigation. But beyond that, I can't think of circumstances to where like a traffic stop that would be prohibited from recording in that type of example.
Great, thanks, sir. That's all the questions we have at this point in time that I see. Does anybody else have anything they would like to add as we look at kind of closing this thing out?
Well, I'll have something to say at the end, but I'll let Nadine go first.
I just want to say thank you for everybody for joining us tonight, and to please understand that the reason why we came up with the topic of recording your police officer is because we've seen this last year tons of video of people in their own communities reporting our law enforcement. And then we have, situations here in our city, in our county, where people are being told the opposite, that you can't do this. And so we're just answering to the concerns of our community members where they want clarification. And thankfully, BPD is willing to go out with us and answer questions when we're trying to do what's best for our community. And so I just want to say thank you, everybody, for your time, for joining us. Please share this video because it is recorded. And thank you, Chief Terry, and thank you to everybody on the team this evening. So we're just trying to do best for our community, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Nadine, and I appreciate you being a part of the conversation tonight. And to the broader community, we talked about this at the beginning, so did Walter, that we have many more of these kinds of forums planned. Hopefully they will be in person. And we're going to talk about a lot more different types of topics that that are difficult at times. Talk about bias. We'll talk about racial profiling. We'll talk about uses of force. We'll talk about in detail the citizen complaint process and how we investigate them. We're going to talk about a variety of things. Last year, or in 2019, when we were able to do it, we brought our simulator out to some of the community groups in the meetings with Bakersfield Community Policing and allowed members of the community to go through that. And we talked about deadly force. We talked about what the law is on deadly force and how those things are investigated. So I would tell you that there's going to be many more of those types of conversations. We're planning some of those workshops now. Hopefully they will be in person in the future later this year. But I know tonight's topic was relatively narrow and the law is very clear. So it's not a lot to discuss. But I know Walter, like I said at the beginning, Walter's been here at the table for many, many years, and Nadine's here and many other members of their team, and we've been having a lot of these types of conversations. And so more topics are planned, and like I said, those are example of some of the topics that we have planned, because we recognize that if we're really going to strengthen relationships, we have to have some hard conversations about some very difficult topics at times. But we want you to know what we think. We want you to know how we're operating. We want you to know what our intentions are. And I think that's very important for us to, at least it is to me, as chief of this police department, and I'm so proud of the men and women who work here and what they do every day. But I want to be clear that our intent is to be the best law enforcement agency we can for this community. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. And we want to know about these things when they occur. And we are committed to doing that in building a stronger community. So thank you very much to all of you who attended tonight. And I guess I'll leave the last word to Walter.
All I wanted to say, thank you for joining. Quit living in fear. That's why we make an advocate position where you can come and give your complaints and feel comfortable, and you get help from writing to going inside the internal affair right to the end. And it's all about us coming out the closet. Quit living in fear. Come out the closet and be part of your new police reform and your new community. And let's celebrate the new life that we're going to have with our police department. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you, everybody. With that being said, I appreciate it, and thank you for sending these questions in. There were some other ones that we didn't get to because they were kind of off topic, but those are not going on deaf ears. We are taking notes for potential future conversations, and we appreciate it. So, Chief, unless you have nothing else, I'm going to shut her down.
All right. Thank you, everyone.